Chicago has many buildings which solidify its skyline as one of the best in the world. Whether it's the modern and sleek St. Regis Tower or the daunting John Hancock Center, every building elevates the city's industrious aura. But the undisputed champion is, of course, the Sears Tower, which boasts a mind-boggling 110 stories. Now, before you go in the comments and furiously tell me how I'm wrong, I know it's the Willis Tower now. But for the sake of this video and my own sanity, I'm just going to call it the Sears.
Even now, standing a mile away from the tower itself, it absolutely dominates the skyline. A Chicago without this iconic skyscraper is pretty much unimaginable, but 60 years ago, its existence was not so certain.
The year is 1969. The Sears company is facing a massively growing issue. Their company over the last 70 years has grown exponentially and now has over 350,000 employees. Obviously, such a large company needs massive amounts of office space. Sears was not just a regular run-of-the-mill retail store. It was by far the largest in the world at this point. Their various small offices in the suburbs of Chicago were simply not cutting it anymore, so company executives hatched a plan to build a new center for Sears. They tasked their outside counsel to find a new location for this building, and they came up with two prime locations. The first offer was made for an area on Goose Island, an artificial island northwest of the Loop, but Matthew Stacom, vice president of real estate at Sears, rejected this idea. This ultimately left only the second option, a two-block area in the center of downtown and the location where the tower stands today. Although the second location was technically a lot smaller, it was much more centrally located, which made it a more attractive option for the executives. Over the span of about a year, Sears spent millions of dollars buying up all the property where their new building was going to be. They also spent $2.7 million on the city of Chicago to combine two blocks by closing down a section of Quincy Street. That's almost $22 million in 2024. With the city space allocated, it was now time to design the actual tower. For this task, Sears commissioned the architecture firm Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, or SOM for short. After some initial designs and deliberation, architect Bruce Graham and structural engineer Fazlur Rahman Khan proposed the tower we know and love today.
This innovative design plan had a 3x3 steel tube setup bundled together with a tapering effect. This taper was practical not only economically but also architecturally. Not only did this allow the tower to be taller, it also created a variety of different office space floor plans, which allowed for a variety of different tenants to occupy the massive amount of office spaces.
With the design process finally out of the way, the time for construction was here. In 1970, they started construction of the tallest building in the world at the time. This brought the first problem. In order to build such a massive tower, a ridiculously strong foundation was needed. This led construction workers to digging out over 180,000 cubic feet of dirt. All this while rerouting electric, sewer, and communication lines. With the foundation dug out, 50 feet worth of concrete with reinforced rebar was poured in the hole, and then a concrete plant was built on top of that in order to speed up construction. This was a pretty smart move considering that over 4.2 million square feet of concrete would be poured over the next 3 years. Since this was a time way before cell phones, telephone stations had to be set up on every single floor. Huge heating arrays also had to be built at the base of the building in order to protect the workers from the frigid Chicago winters, which could reach well into the negatives. All in all, this construction process took over 3 years, employed over 2,000 workers, and cost over $1 billion in today's money. The construction of the tower also had a much heavier cost unrelated to money. That being the lives of 5 men who died in tragic accidents during construction. Halfway through the construction process, the second big problem arose. Media companies and local citizens began to raise concerns that this massive tower would affect reception for television and radio across the city. Some estimates put the number of affected households at over 60,000. Within a few months of these raised concerns, the nearby city of Skokie threatened to put an injunction on Sears preventing further construction. The Illinois Citizens Committee for Broadcasting also filed a formal complaint with the FCC, which further added to the pressure on the company's legal team. At first, Sears didn't do much to combat these claims, which ultimately led to their first lawsuit against the building. This came from the village of Skokie and Deerfield on March 17, 1997. This lawsuit claimed that the building was infringing on the rights of all the homeowners across the city who owned a television. Another lawsuit was also filed against Sears on the same day, this time from the state's attorney of Lake County. Both of these lawsuits shared a common goal: prevent the Sears Tower from going past the 67th floor, as it was determined that anything higher than that would significantly reduce radio and television reception across the city. At the time of these lawsuits, the building was already on its 50th floor. The 67th floor would have been reached within a couple of weeks, which only made resolving this legal battle a huge priority. In an effort to gain support for their case, prosecutors began showing simulated pictures of a television before and after the tower. These showcases alarmed locals to such an extent that TV sales in the city fell dramatically, and increased pressure was put on Sears to halt construction.
Finally, under threat that the Sears building would be cut in half, engineers finally looked into ways to combat the reception issue. All this while construction still boldly continued, even though multiple lawsuits were still being pressed against the Sears Tower. Eventually, engineers had an idea: add a 350-foot tall antenna to the top of the tower. This idea was criticized by pretty much all the broadcasting companies in Chicago, but Sears went through with it anyway. Theoretically, an antenna of this size would be able to reroute all of the signals from radio and TV broadcasting around the city and completely negate the effects that such a tall building in the middle of downtown would have. The day after the FAA accepted this proposal, the Supreme Court Justices of Illinois came to a conclusion. The citizens of the city did not have the right to clear viewing on television. This decision not only allowed the Sears Tower to be built to the height that it is today, but it also had massive repercussions for the rest of the skyscrapers to be built over the next few decades.
This was the final major threat to the construction of the building, which continued on for the next 11 months. A few issues persisted, the main ones being labor strikes and the reallocation of broadcast stations into the tower, but overall, the latter half of the construction went on without issue. The building finally opened on September 9, 1973. A new set of beacons underneath the antenna was also installed, being the first of its kind in the entire city. In the end, the Sears Tower stands at a whopping 1,729 feet, retaining its spot as the tallest skyscraper in the world for 25 years. This building marked the end of a difficult path to construction, the peak of Sears, and the beginning of a new era for the city of Chicago.